Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm Laurie Spadorci. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Partnerships at CMH, and I'm very happy to be your MC for this announcement today. We are really pleased, as always, to have anyone on our property here at CMH. For those of you who know, we've been transforming this property for the last decade, and we're actually putting a shovel in the ground again for our next phase this year again. So lots going on. This building here, 100 Lower Ossington, is actually not a CMH building, and it was purposely built. The vision of the redevelopment here was to have mixed uses, to really, literally and figuratively break down the walls of the old asylum and rebuild to allow the community to come in and have mixed uses to normalize the environment and break down the stigma around mental illness. So this building was much needed at the time in West Queen West. The property houses families and bachelors. It's affordable housing. There are some CMH clients here who live here. And also, you'll see on the streetscape the Shoppers Drug Mart, the TD Bank. It's amazing to actually have this on all of these services on this property here at CMH. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome our Member of Parliament, Adam Vaughan, who's the MP for Spadina-Fort York, and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. He's long been a champion of affordable and supportive housing and is a champion for CMH and the cause of mental health. So I will welcome Adam to the stage for today's announcement.
Thank you very much, and I'm joined on stage with Julie DeBruzen, who is a Member of Parliament for Toronto Danforth and also a strong voice not just for housing but also food security in Toronto, which is part of how we build affordability into our neighbourhoods and support families that have core housing needs. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit and the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat before that, and the Anishinaabe people. As we move towards truth and reconciliation, housing plays a critical role in making sure that our brothers and sisters in the Aboriginal community, the Métis Nation, and the Inuit families also move forward as we accommodate people that have housing needs, but also that have aspirations to join the middle class and work hard to get there. Good morning. Thanks for CMH for hosting us today. My top priority is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for, it's a long title, Families, Children, Social Development, is Housing and Urban Affairs. It's part of the job description I have, is to move these issues forward in a way that grow stronger cities by building better neighborhoods and housing for all. Growing the middle class, as I said, is a critical way. Housing is a critical component of delivering people to the middle class as we support them as they move through the different economic stages of their lives. And a key element of this agenda is improving access to quality, affordable housing. It's the cornerstone of building these sustainable communities. It's a safe place where children learn and grow, where families can share the stories around the dinner table, where families find the stability they need to succeed not only in the job market, but to succeed in all elements of their lives. And while much attention has been focused on the high cost of home ownership in Canada, and in particular here in Toronto, the option of rental housing is also a critical component of how we house people in this country. Approximately 30% of Canadians rely on rental housing to meet their shelter needs. Our government is committed to taking action to help these Canadian families. And as you recall, in Budget 26, we included two very important initiatives to support the creation of rental housing. The Affordable Rental Housing Innovation Fund was launched by CMHC last fall to spur innovation, and it's going to encourage the development of new solutions and innovative ideas to lower the risk and the cost of rental housing projects. Through this fund, CMHC is providing more than $200 million over 5 years to create up to 4,000 new affordable rental units while reducing reliance on long-term government subsidies to achieve this shelter need. But today I'm pleased to announce the launch of a second initiative that'll have an even greater impact on the supply of rental housing to the market. The Rental Construction Financing Initiative will offer up to $2.5 billion in low-cost loans over the next 4 years to municipalities, to nonprofit housing providers, to housing developers in the private market to encourage the construction of new rental units right across the country. These low-cost loans will be provided by CMHC to ensure that cost predictability during the earliest and the most sensitive stages of the development process are supported. It'll ease up a number of opportunities, and we expect a significant contribution to come from both the private sector and the nonprofit sector here, and we think that this will create close to 10,000 new rental units right across the country. This is important for communities like Toronto. It's important for communities like Timmins. The delivery of rental housing starts to tease out the market and starts to deliver housing options to people with a range of different economic capacities. Several aspects of this new financing initiative are unique, and I want to thank the stakeholders. We've been in consultation nonstop since we took office, who've contributed their insight, their recommendations to the development of this extraordinarily important new policy. First and foremost, applicants will have to demonstrate to achieve the support that their projects will be financially viable, but that's only one part of the criteria. Borrowers will also be expected to meet minimum requirements for affordability, energy efficiency, and accessibility for people with disabilities. The financing initiatives will also prioritize projects that demonstrate a greater social outcomes that contribute to vibrant, socially inclusive neighborhoods. One of the other criteria is access to public transit. Since the start of this program of re-entering as a federal government into the housing strategy, into the housing field, one of the things we've talked about continuously is not just building housing, but building communities that function. It's why the Social Infrastructure Fund includes funding for things like libraries and community centers and recreation space. It's not just about building a house for somebody or building housing. It's about building communities and housing people with all their needs. And the rental housing part of this is a vital component of that, as it creates a hop, skip, and a jump, possibly to home ownership, but it also stabilizes families who are in transition and gives them places to live. So the program builds on all of this and is also an opportunity for new partnerships to emerge between the nonprofit sector, the private development industry, and government. By being closer to public transit, schools, and services, thousands of parents will also have the opportunity to do what we're really trying to do, which is build a better quality of life for themselves by having access to the services they need, having time with their families, with their children, and also making sure that we take the most environmentally progressive approach to how we construct new housing. The Rental Housing Construction Financing Initiative is complemented by other CMHC programs. For example, a housing provider could also apply for seed funding from CMHC to help cover some of the upfront costs of developing new housing project proposals. The same project might also qualify for a grant from the Innovation Fund, as we mentioned earlier. Importantly, loans provided under this new initiative will include mortgage loan insurance from CMHC. This will give developers access to preferred interest rates and simplify loan renewal throughout the life of the mortgage. Our government's vision is for every Canadian to have access to housing that meets their needs, and this is why housing is the single largest investment in Budget 2017. Over the next 11 years, we will invest an additional $11.2 billion to build new and renew our existing stock of affordable housing right across the country. These investments will form the cornerstone of the new national housing strategy that will improve housing outcomes for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The Rental Construction Financing Initiative will become part of the strategy, which will be launched later this year. Budget 2017 also enables a new direct lending initiative for the renewal of social and affordable housing. Combined with Budget 2016's lending initiatives, the amount of capital available for lending at low cost is expected to be more than $10 billion over the next 11 years. This is an extraordinary investment by the federal government in the delivery of not just rental housing, but when you add to that the $11.2 billion for the construction of new social housing, and you add to that the base of about $4 billion in base funding, you can see that the amount announced in the budget is close to $25 billion over the next 11 years to deliver affordable housing to Canadians right across the spectrum of housing needs. This is a substantial investment. It is the federal government returning to a leadership position in creating a new national housing strategy for Canada, and for this city of Toronto, it is fundamental to changing the game in terms of how we deliver the housing we need to sustain the economic diversity of this city. It's also how we help deliver a better quality of life for citizens in Toronto and across Canada. Our government is making smart, strategic investments that are going to grow Canada's economy, lift Canadians out of poverty, and contribute to strong and more inclusive communities while putting people to work. We understand the value of having a home of one's own. We recognize the struggles that many Canadians have in achieving this goal to find adequate and affordable housing, but we're determined as a government to be a partner with the province and cities and the Aboriginal communities to deliver on this agenda and to deliver housing for Canadians where they need it, how they need it, and how they can afford it. And we're happy to take your questions. A couple more? There we go. Sorry about that. We'll take your questions after.
You were trying to take over my MC role. Thank you for that. We're really pleased to hear about the new national housing strategy and the announcement today. This is really important for all Canadians, as you've mentioned in your remarks, and also for those with issues related to mental health. Not long ago, we used to think that there was little hope for recovery from mental illness. What we know today is that recovery is possible, and that a key imperative to that recovery is access to safe and well-maintained affordable housing. We believe that a safe place to live is a healthcare right. Here's a story that's very common at CMH. John, who is an outpatient, after 3 years of waiting for an apartment and commuting up to an hour from his previous residence to access outpatient care and hospital services, moved into a bachelor unit here at 100 Lower Ossington. To John, the new apartment was a crucial step in his recovery and provided a better quality of life. He said lots of people have had crisis in their lives and they get back on their feet. I'm looking forward to living more, he said, taking care of myself, cooking, and having my own space. CMH is optimistic that all levels of government will now work together with leadership at every level. While we know there's still much more to do, we're very encouraged by this great step forward. A housing strategy is important to city building and also critical to the health and wealth of all of its citizens. I'm going to now introduce Leslie Ann Becker, who's a resident here at 100 Ossington, just to share a little bit more about the importance of affordable housing before we wrap up. Leslie.
Thank you. The question is, how has affordable rental housing played a part in my own recovery? And first of all, a bit of an introduction. I'm a single female, and I've been a graduate of several education programs, and I come from a loving and supportive family. But I just want to say all kinds of people at different times in their lives run into problems. It can be money problems and mental health problems, and I almost feel that poverty breeds mental health problems. It happens to everybody, all of us. I live here at 100 Lower Ossington now. The place I had before this was a dark basement with one tiny window, and not cheap for that. We all know what comes with these places: rodents and bugs and leaks, etc. It's depressing. Affordable housing has made getting up in the morning so much better, getting up in the morning so much nicer. When I got this place, I moved my bed in the next day, and I didn't care if any of my other stuff was there. I just wanted to wake up in a bright place. And this has given me a bright, airy, and safe and secure place that's happier and optimistic. It's much sunnier even on a cloudy day, and the safety and stability has been huge, a huge factor in my ability to feel grounded. No slum landlords kicking me out for no good reason, no uninvited guests coming to my door at any hour, and not feeling alone. Living within a community has made a huge difference, and seeing people in the elevators and in the common areas, I feel like a real person and more like a part of society. After I moved and I got my new bright space, I could actually see my dishes when I washed them. So the affordability aspect is huge. It lets you live a little bit, and it doesn't take all your earnings. When short on work and short on money, one can't even go for a walk to the coffee shop and can't afford a coffee even for a few days of the week. And for certain can't go out to a movie. Cooking every meal at home and mostly vegetables, rice, and cereal, it's the cheapest way to live. Affordable housing has made a big difference for me, and the government funding is important for affordable housing. People like me, and there are a lot of us, and we come in all sizes and forms. And I am truly appreciative for what I have now. It's everything for the positive effect on mood it has had. And lastly, I was speaking with my mother recently, and I said that this is the first time in my life that I have felt I am looking forward to the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie, for telling your story. I think it's really important when we talk about these announcements to understand the impact on our citizens. I think we're going to conclude. I want to thank everyone for coming today and invite our elected officials back up to take questions now.
Thanks very much. So, yes.
When you talk about developers, can you define what developer is? Is it a large developer? Is it a single person? What would that be?
It's really up to the industry now to respond to this opportunity. We don't have a prescribed project in mind. We're looking for applications to come forward. There are different thresholds in terms of what we're trying to deliver here. We also have just launched with the announcements in Budget 2017, the negotiations that are starting with the provinces that started last year. The notion of portable rent subsidies are also on the table and part of the equation here. If we can increase the supply of market rental housing, which is just coming back to life in Toronto right now, and hopefully with all of the announcements today, we'll start to see even more construction. We can then drive affordability into the private market with rent subsidies. So we're looking at projects that range from sort of the buildings you see around here today, with sort of the mid-rise on the main streets buildings that support transit but also support folks with core housing need. We're looking to take a look at the private development that's happening right in the downtown core, where you've got large condominiums, where we have started to place rental housing inside condominiums, and we're looking for models like that to emerge. Now is the time to innovate. Now is the time to think through the ideas that have been bottled up for the last 20 years and bring them to the market. And we're, as a government, there prepared to help with the financing, prepared to help with the subsidies and the construction costs through an agenda, an array of programs that will help deliver it. So the size of the project, it can be the loans could be small for targeted investments, and they can be larger for more substantial delivery of a product in a way that meets the needs of Torontonians. But there's no prescribed outcome here. What there is a government willing to partner with the provincial, the municipal, and the nonprofit sector to deliver the housing that's needed in a way that's affordable.
So let's say if there was, excuse me, because I continue. So let's say there was a small unit, like 1 or 2 houses, and there are lots of them around Toronto. That would be a small developer. And how can people apply for this? Is it through banks or what?
So you apply. There is a website that will be constructed in the next few days that will show how the program rolls out. You will go to the CMHC website. There will be a space to look at the application process. The hope here is that we deliver a loan structure that as you start to think about formulating a new project, you can talk to CMHC about how to acquire below market loans to help with the financing and the delivery and construction of the project. The loans will effectively deliver a better financing tool, and as a result, when you drop the cost of financing of construction process and you guarantee the arrival of below market rents to a city, you end up with the product that's needed to house people and get that segment of the market dealt with. Yep.
I just want to commend Adam for, again, taking a very strong leadership role he did when he was city councillor and allowed condos to be recognized as potential affordable housing. And that was a really big step. And he's continued that with the National Housing Strategy and these announcements. And it's welcome news to us in the sector. However, it's great to have incentives put out. It's hard when the very same morning there are disincentives that are put out. And partnerships are what it's all about, and I'm happy that you mentioned rent subsidy, because that's the direction we've gone in private and subsidy. We have affordability issues, and we have very strong partnerships with the private development community. And so how are we going to continue on the incentive side, but not the disincentive side, with other levels of government. Everybody has to be on the same page, and can't keep taking a page out of the book and putting a new page in the book.
It's the housing market in particular in Toronto is a complex continuum of opportunities, but also challenges. Land values in Toronto present even their own dilemma in terms of how we bring these projects forward. I won't comment specifically on what the province has done today, or what the city is contemplating in terms of its policies. But what we're hoping to do with the National Housing Strategy is put in place a sort of a tray of services that allow opportunities to emerge. And while some policies are aimed at supporting tenants and keeping tenants in a place of affordability, we also have to make sure that the market has a supply of rental units so that we can get a handle on this issue. The challenge with housing, and I think you're seeing this now, is as we start to pull apart the different elements of the housing market that are providing challenges, whether it's single-family homes, whether it's social housing with assistance, is that we've kind of looked at it as either social housing or private housing. And what we know is that the continuum of housing is actually much more complex than that. One of the other things we are working very hard to do, and I think this is a critical for the story we just heard and for the work that CMH does around transitioning people through different types of housing, there has long been a problem with providing supports for people in housing as we find affordable housing for people that need support. In fact, there have been government policies that have prevented subsidies for health care, for example, for people with disabilities or severe disabilities, or for people that have mental health issues who need support to stay in supportive and safe housing. There has been a prohibition against funding the housing they need and funding the supports they need, and having those two arrive in a community to deliver the services to house people. We're moving that away and giving people the opportunity to create these dynamic partnerships, to take a look at the list of services and supports available from all three levels of government, and to combine them to deliver the housing that's needed. And while we talk about the housing program, it's important to acknowledge that Minister Jane Philpott has just signed a health accord in Ontario that includes a top-up for supportive housing, in particular for people with mental health challenges that need supports to live independently in the community. So it's not just a housing program, it's also a health care policy that works in concert with a housing program. And as we deliver more product to the market, those supports can land in many more communities and give people even more choices, so they can choose to live close to family or close to supports that they require, or close to work or training that they need as they emerge into the city with more capacity. The flexibility is critical. The array of funding models is fundamental, and we have got to start to address every segment of the housing market if we're going to deal with the housing crisis in a comprehensive way. So the province is working, the cities are working, we're working, and I think for the first time in this city, all three levels of government are coordinating their efforts to try and deliver as many choices to people as possible, not realizing, of course, that sometimes government policies collide. But that's not what we're talking about here today. What we're talking about here today is good news for those looking for rental housing. The government of Canada is now back in the leadership role and back supporting the delivery of that product to the market.
Yeah, fantastic news in terms of the housing and those supports. As you know, I work a lot with those with developmental disabilities and REIN and the Intentional Community Consortium. There was extensive mention in the budget of federal surplus lands that will now be available to nonprofits. Has anything more developed from that, and what would the avenue be to find out where those lands might be?
So right now, the Government of Canada is doing an all-government approach to listing the surplus lands that are available from department to department. Public Works is leading this exercise. The process hasn't quite finalized, as we're looking at not just what is surplus land, but what is also appropriate land for residential development. The announcements and the process by which that will conclude and start to list is included in Budget 2017 as one of the contributions to a national housing strategy, but the full catalog of available properties hasn't yet been produced. I've seen an early draft, and it looks very promising. I'm drove in today from an earlier meeting and drove by a site and actually looked at it and said, wow, yeah, you could actually deliver a lot more housing on a subway line on this site, which is owned by the Government of Canada. But it's been sitting there since the 50s as a two-story building on the Danforth. It could actually be so much more. And when we say so much more, it's not just a question of affordable rental housing being delivered to the market. It's also purpose-built housing for people with disabilities. It's also looking at how we invest services that we're now funding at the federal level to support housing to deliver us that much more and create the complexity and the diversity of housing stock and services we need to house people properly. This is not just get people into housing and hope that they succeed. This is about helping people build the lives they want by building the housing they need.
Great.
Thanks very much.